He's lying to his own wife. The thought hit Emily Carter the second the words left Daniel Whitmore's mouth. The deal collapsed because of market volatility, Daniel said smoothly, not even glancing up from his glass of Napa Valley Cabernet. His voice carried just enough regret to sound believable. Across from him, Laura Whitmore nodded slowly, her fingers resting on the edge of a white linen napkin, her diamond ring catching the soft light of the restaurant. Emily stood beside the table, holding a tray with 2 plates of dry-aged ribeye, her posture straight, her expression neutral. But her pulse had shifted. Just an hour earlier, in the private dining room near the back hallway, she had heard Daniel's real voice. Not the polished one. The other one. "I killed the deal myself," he had said, low and precise. It was the only way to move the assets before they noticed. Emily had been refilling water glasses at the time. She had not meant to listen. But she had not missed a single word. Now he was rewriting that truth in front of his wife. She placed the plates down carefully. The steak knife aligned perfectly with the fork. The motion steady. Controlled. "Medium rare, sir," she said. Daniel gave a small nod, dismissive, already turning back to his investors. "For men in tailored suits. Watches that probably cost more than her annual rent." One of them chuckled. "Tough quarter all around," he said. "You handled it well." Emily stepped back, but she did not leave. Not yet. She adjusted the water glass in front of Laura. A small action. Enough to stay within earshot. Laura looked at Daniel again. "You said everything was under control last week." Her tone was soft, but there was a question beneath it. Daniel smiled. "Calm. Practiced." It was. Until it wasn't. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. Not anger. Not surprise. Recognition. She had seen this before. Different place. Different man. Same tone. The tone people used when they expected no one would challenge them. She turned and walked toward the service station. The hum of Manhattan outside filtered through the glass windows. Yellow cabs. Sirens in the distance. A couple at the bar arguing quietly over a bill. Normal life continued. She set the empty tray down and reached for the check printer. Her hand paused for half a second. Then she moved again. Efficient. Professional. "You okay?" Mia asked from the espresso machine, sliding a cappuccino across the counter. Table 12 looks tense. Emily gave a small nod. "They're discussing a deal." Mia smirked. "Aren't they always?" Emily did not answer. Instead, she picked up a folded receipt that had been left near the printer earlier. Not hers. She recognized the name at the top. Whitmore Holdings. The timestamp read 3:17 p.m. The exact time she had been in that private room. Her eyes moved across the lines. Numbers. Adjustments. A note in the margin. She read it once. Then again. Her grip tightened slightly. That was not a market collapse. That was a deliberate shift. She folded the paper again. Precise. Careful. Then she slipped it back where she found it. No one noticed. When she returned to the dining room, Daniel was laughing. Relax now. In control again. Laura smiled politely, but her eyes lingered on him a second too long. Emily stepped beside the table with the wine bottle. "Would you like a refill?" Laura looked up. "Yes, please." Emily poured slowly. The deep red liquid caught the light as it filled the glass. For a moment, everything looked calm. Balanced. Then Daniel glanced at Emily. Just a glance. But something in his expression shifted. A flicker. He had seen something. Or sensed it. Emily met his eyes. Steady. Quiet. And for the first time that evening, Daniel Whitmore stopped smiling. Daniel Whitmore did not look away first. That was the kind of man he was. But he did something else. He reached for his wine glass, slower than before, as if buying himself half a second to think. Emily noticed. She always noticed the pauses people thought were invisible. "Thank you," Laura said as Emily finished pouring. Her voice was polite, but her eyes flicked between Emily and Daniel, catching something unspoken in the air. Emily gave a small nod and stepped back. This time, she did not linger. She walked toward the service station, her pace measured, her posture unchanged. Behind her, the conversation resumed, but it had shifted. The rhythm was off by just enough to feel wrong. At the station, Mia leaned closer. "Okay, what happened at that table?" she whispered. Emily reached for a clean cloth and began wiping an already spotless counter. "Nothing unusual," she said. Mia raised an eyebrow. "That is your something is very wrong," the voice. Emily almost smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Just keep an eye on table 12, she said quietly. Mia followed her gaze. "The billionaire guy?" Emily nodded once. "And his wife?" Mia let out a soft breath. "Got it." Emily turned away and walked toward the back hallway. The private dining room door was slightly open. Inside, the table had been cleared, but a leather portfolio still sat at the far end, half hidden behind a chair. The same one Daniel had used earlier. She stepped inside. One movement. Quick. Controlled. She opened the portfolio just enough to see the contents. Printed emails. A contract draft. And a handwritten note clipped to the top page. She did not touch anything. She read. Transfer executed prior to disclosure window. Her eyes moved down. A timestamp. 3:14 p.m. 1 minute before the receipt she had seen. Her jaw tightened slightly. That was not just manipulation. That was premeditated. Footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway. Emily closed the portfolio and stepped back just as a busboy pushed a cart past the door. He did not look in. She waited 1 beat, then 2, and walked out. Back in the dining room, the energy at table 12 had shifted again. One of the investors was asking a question. "Daniel, can you walk us through the timeline again?" His tone was casual, but there was an edge now. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Relaxed. In control. "Of course," he said. He picked up his fork, cut into the steak, and spoke as if nothing had changed. "We entered negotiations in late Q2. The volatility hit in early Q3. That is when things started to unravel." Emily approached the table with a small tray. 2 fresh side plates. An excuse to step closer. Laura looked at him carefully. "That is not what you told me last Friday," she said. The words landed softly, but they did not disappear. Daniel's knife paused for a fraction of a second. Then it continued. "I simplified it," he replied. "I did not want to worry you." Emily placed the plates down. Her movements precise. She straightened one of the forks by half an inch. A small correction. A visible one. Daniel's eyes flicked to her hands. Then back to her face. This time, there was no mistaking it. He knew she knew. "Sir," Emily said calmly, her voice even. "Would you like me to bring the documents you left in the private room earlier?" The table went still. One of the investors looked up. "Documents." Laura turned to Daniel. "You had another meeting here today." Daniel set his knife down. Slowly. Deliberately. "That will not be necessary," he said, his tone still smooth, but tighter now. Emily did not move. "They seemed important," she replied. "I thought you might need them." Laura's gaze sharpened. "Daniel." Just his name. Nothing more. But it carried weight. Daniel looked at Emily again. Longer this time. Measuring. Calculating. Then he smiled. A different smile. Controlled, but colder. Actually, he said, pushing his chair back slightly. Why do we not take a moment to review them? He stood up. Excuse me, he added to the table. Then he looked directly at Emily. Walk with me. Emily met his gaze. Steady. Unshaken. She gave a small nod and turned toward the hallway. As they stepped away from the table, the low murmur of the restaurant swallowed the silence between them. But the moment the hallway door closed behind them, Daniel's voice dropped. You should be very careful about what you think you heard, he said. Emily stopped walking. Turned. Looked him straight in the eye. I am careful, she said quietly. That is why I remember everything. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black card. He held it between two fingers. Some things are not your concern, he said. But they can become your opportunity. Emily did not take the card. The air between them shifted again. And this time, it was clear. This was no longer about a mistake. It was about a choice. Emily looked at the black card in Daniel's hand but did not reach for it. The hallway light cast a sharp line across his face, splitting the polished executive from something colder underneath. Opportunity, she repeated, her voice calm. Is that what you call it? Daniel gave a small shrug. I call it efficiency. You heard something you were not supposed to. I am offering you a way to walk away from it. Emily studied him for a moment. Not his words. His timing. His posture. The way his thumb rested lightly on the edge of the card. As if he had done this before. And if I do not, she asked. Daniel's expression did not change. Then you are a waitress who misunderstood a private conversation, he said evenly. In a restaurant where reputation matters. The implication landed cleanly. Not loud. Not threatening. Just precise. Emily let out a slow breath. For a brief second, the hallway seemed smaller. Not because of him. Because of memory. 3 years ago. A different office. A different man in a tailored suit. You are overstepping, Emily, her former supervisor had said back then, his voice carrying the same calm certainty. She had reported a discrepancy. Numbers that did not align. Transfers that made no sense. 2 weeks later, she was escorted out with a cardboard box and a polite explanation about organizational restructuring. No proof. No record. Just a closed door. She had learned something that day. Truth alone was not enough. Timing mattered. Evidence mattered more. Emily blinked once and came back to the present. Daniel was still holding the card. Still waiting. You are assuming I need something from you, she said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Curious now. Everyone needs something, he replied. Emily reached forward. For a moment, it looked like she would take the card. Instead, she adjusted the cuff of his jacket by 1/2 inch. A small, deliberate movement. Your sleeve is uneven, she said quietly. Daniel stilled. The gesture was subtle, but it shifted the balance. She stepped back. I do not need anything, she added. I just pay attention. A flicker crossed his eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Calculation. Be careful what you do with that attention, he said. Emily gave a small nod. I always am. From the dining room, the sound of a glass being set down too hard echoed faintly. Laura's voice followed. Daniel, I asked you a question. There was no softness in it now. Daniel glanced toward the door, then back at Emily. The moment stretched. Then he slipped the black card back into his pocket. We will finish this later, he said. Not a threat. A promise. He turned and walked back toward the table. Emily watched him go for half a second, then moved in the opposite direction. Toward the service station. Mia looked up immediately. That did not look friendly, she said under her breath. Emily reached for the order pad. It was not supposed to be, she replied. Mia frowned. Do you need me to call the manager? Emily shook her head. Not yet. She tore off a blank slip and wrote something quickly. A time. A number. Then she folded it and slipped it into her apron pocket. Mia noticed. What is that? Emily met her eyes. A timeline, she said. Back at table 12, the atmosphere had changed completely. One of the investors was no longer eating. Another was checking his phone, likely pulling up market data. Laura sat upright now, her gaze fixed on Daniel as he returned to his seat. So, she said, her voice steady. You had another meeting here today. Daniel picked up his glass again, but he did not drink. Yes, he said. Simple. Direct. A new approach. Laura leaned forward slightly. And you did not think to mention that. Daniel set the glass down. It was not relevant. Emily stepped back into the room, her eyes moving across the table, reading every shift, every hesitation. The pieces were no longer hidden. They were starting to move. She adjusted her apron and took one step closer. This time, she did not wait for permission. Excuse me, she said calmly. There is just one detail I want to make sure is correct. Daniel's head turned sharply. Laura's eyes followed. The investors went still. Emily held their attention without raising her voice. Mr. Whitmore, she continued, what time did that meeting end? The question hung in the air. Simple. Precise. Impossible to ignore. Daniel looked at her. Then at the table. Then back at her again. And for the first time that night, he did not answer immediately. Daniel finally spoke. Around 4 o'clock, he said, his tone steady again, as if he had found his footing. Emily nodded once, as if accepting the answer. Thank you, she replied. Then she reached into her apron pocket. Slow. Deliberate. She unfolded the small slip of paper she had written minutes earlier. That is interesting, she said calmly. Laura's eyes shifted to the paper. One of the investors leaned forward slightly. Daniel's gaze hardened. What is this? He asked. Emily held the paper between two fingers, just enough for the table to see. A timestamp, she said. From your receipt earlier this afternoon. 3:17 p.m. She placed it gently on the table next to his wine glass. The white paper stood out against the dark wood. Clean. Verifiable. Laura looked down at it, then back at Daniel. You said the meeting ended at 4. Daniel did not touch the paper. It did, he replied. That is just when the payment was processed. Emily tilted her head slightly. That would make sense, she said. If the meeting had still been ongoing. A pause. Controlled. Then she added, but the private dining room was cleared by staff at 3:25. I know because I reset the table myself. The shift was immediate. One of the investors straightened in his chair. Another stopped scrolling on his phone. Laura's expression changed. Not dramatic. Just sharper. More focused. Daniel, she said, her voice lower now. Why would the room be cleared if the meeting was still happening? Daniel leaned back slowly. He folded his hands together on the table. A calculated move. You are taking the word of a waitress over mine, he asked, his eyes moving briefly to Emily, then back to Laura. It was not anger. It was strategy. Redirect. Undermine. Emily did not react to the label. She reached for the wine bottle and adjusted it by an inch, aligning it with the edge of the table. Another small, visible action. I am not asking anyone to take my word, she said. I am just pointing out the sequence. She turned slightly toward the investors. The receipt was printed at 3:17. The room was empty by 3:25. And the documents were still inside when I checked just now. The word documents landed differently this time. Heavier. One of the investors spoke up. What documents? Emily met his gaze. A contract draft and printed emails, she said. Left in a leather portfolio in the private room. Daniel's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled again. That is confidential material, he said. You should not be going through it. Emily nodded. I did not remove anything, she replied. I just noticed a note clipped to the top page. Laura leaned forward. What note? The room had shifted fully now. No one was eating. No one was pretending this was a normal dinner anymore. Emily spoke carefully. Each word placed with intention. It mentioned a transfer executed prior to the disclosure window, she said. Silence followed. Not the casual kind. The kind that holds weight. One of. The investors exchanged a glance with another. Laura's fingers tightened slightly around her napkin. Daniel, she said, her voice steady but firm. What does that mean? Daniel did not answer immediately. His eyes moved from the paper on the table to Emily, then to the investors, then finally back to Laura. The control was slipping. Not gone. But slipping. It means, he said slowly, that someone is misinterpreting internal notes without context. Emily stepped back half a step. Giving space. Letting the words settle. That is possible, she said. Context matters. She looked at Daniel. Calm. Unblinking. That is why timelines matter too. The investor who had spoken earlier leaned forward again. Daniel, he said, his tone no longer casual. We need to be very clear about this. Laura did not look away from her husband. Yes, she added quietly. We do. Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time, it was not controlled. It was measured. Calculated again, but heavier. He reached for the receipt on the table. Picked it up. Looked at it. Then set it back down. I think, he said, his voice returning to that polished edge, we should all take a moment before jumping to conclusions. Emily watched him. Not his words. His timing again. The slight delay before each sentence. The way his fingers tapped once against the table. A signal. He was adjusting. Rebuilding. And then she saw it. A small detail. Almost invisible. The edge of a second document inside his jacket pocket. A folded corner. Different from the portfolio. Not part of what he had left behind. Something he had kept. Emily's eyes narrowed just slightly. New information. New leverage. She stepped forward again. Just enough to re-enter the conversation. Sir, she said calmly, would you like me to bring the rest of the documents from the private room? Daniel looked at her. This time, there was no smile at all. And for the first time that night, the question was not whether she knew something. It was how much more she was about to reveal. Daniel did not answer her question. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The movement was smooth. Controlled. Familiar. He tapped the screen once and held it low, just below the table edge. Emily saw it. Not the screen. The intent. A quiet signal. Within seconds, the floor manager, Richard, appeared at the edge of the dining room. Mid-40s. Crisp suit. The kind of man who noticed problems before they became visible. He walked over with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. Everything all right here? He asked, glancing between Daniel and Emily. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his composure fully restored. Actually, no, he said. Your waitress has been interrupting a private business discussion with speculation about documents she should not have accessed. The words landed cleanly. Professional. Damaging. Richard's gaze shifted to Emily. Emily, he said quietly, can I speak with you for a moment? The power shifted. Subtle. Immediate. Emily nodded once. Of course. She turned to the table. I will be right back. Laura watched her closely. Not dismissive anymore. Not distant. Observing. The investors said nothing. But none of them returned to their meals. In the hallway, Richard's tone changed. What is going on? He asked under his breath. Emily met his eyes. He is lying about a deal, she said. Direct. No hesitation. Richard exhaled slowly. That is not your call to make, he replied. This is a high-profile client. You cannot accuse him in the middle of service. Emily reached into her apron and pulled out the folded receipt. This is his timestamp, she said. Then she added, there are documents in the private room that support it. Richard did not take the paper. He glanced at it, then back at her. Even if that is true, he said, lowering his voice further, you do not handle it like this. You bring it to me. Quietly. Emily held his gaze. And then what? She asked. Richard hesitated for half a second. That was enough. We handle it internally, he said. The answer sounded rehearsed. Safe. Incomplete. Emily nodded slowly. That is what I thought, she said. From the dining room, Daniel's voice carried faintly. Calm. Controlled. Filling the space again. Richard straightened his jacket. I need you to step off the floor for now, he said. Go to the back. I will finish service at that table. The stakes rose. Immediate. Real. Emily was being removed. Not fired. Not yet. But moved out of position. Her access. Her presence. Her voice. All reduced in one decision. Emily looked past Richard toward the dining room. Through the narrow gap in the door, she could see Daniel leaning forward, speaking quietly to Laura. The investors were listening again. The moment was closing. If she stepped back now, it would be over. I understand, she said. Calm. Richard nodded, relieved. Good. We will sort this out after your shift. He turned to go. Emily did not move. Instead, she reached into her apron one more time. Not for the receipt. For something else. A small, folded piece of paper she had taken earlier from the service station. The one with the handwritten note she had memorized. She unfolded it slowly. Before I step off the floor, she said, her voice steady, you should see this. Richard paused. Turned back. Emily held the paper up just enough for him to read the line. Transfer executed prior to disclosure window. Richard's expression changed. Not dramatically. But enough. Recognition. Concern. He looked from the paper to Emily. Then toward the dining room. The situation was no longer just about service protocol. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. Emily answered without hesitation. From the portfolio in the private room. Richard's jaw tightened slightly. He glanced again toward the table. Then back at Emily. The calculation shifted. This was bigger than a complaint. Bigger than a customer. Stay here, he said. Do not go back out yet. He turned and walked quickly toward the dining room. Emily remained in the hallway. Still. Listening. Seconds passed. Then voices rose. Not loud. But sharper. Laura's voice. One of the investors. Then Daniel again. Controlled, but pressed. Emily exhaled slowly. The balance had changed again. Not in her favor. Not yet. But no longer entirely in his. She looked down at the paper in her hand. Then toward the private room door. Still slightly open. Still holding what he had left behind. And what he had kept hidden. Emily folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into her apron. Then she took one step toward the private room. Because if what she had seen was only part of the truth, then the rest of it was still sitting on that table. Waiting. Emily stepped into the private dining room and closed the door halfway behind her. The noise from the restaurant softened instantly. The table was still set from earlier. Clean. Reset. But the leather portfolio remained exactly where she had seen it. Untouched. Waiting. She moved toward it without hesitation. This time, she did not stop at reading. The top page. She opened it fully. Inside were 3 printed emails, a contract draft, and a second set of documents clipped beneath. Her eyes moved quickly. Efficient. Trained. One page caught her attention immediately. A wire transfer confirmation. Amount. $8 million. Destination account. Not listed under Whitmore Holdings. The timestamp read 3:12 p.m. Earlier than everything else. Earlier than the receipt. Earlier than the conversation she overheard. Emily's fingers paused on the edge of the page. That was the missing piece. Not just manipulation. Not just timing. Intent. Structured. Documented. She glanced toward the door. No footsteps. No voices close enough to matter. She reached into her apron and pulled out her phone. Old model. Slight crack across the corner of the screen. She unlocked it and angled the camera carefully. One photo. Then another. Each page captured cleanly. No rush. No noise. She lowered the phone and slipped it back into her apron. Then she froze. A detail she had not noticed before. On the last page. A name. Not Daniel Whitmore. Not any of the investors. A third party. Carter Logistics LLC. Emily's breath slowed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Carter. Her last name. Coincidence? It had to be. But the address listed beneath it was familiar. Too familiar. A small office space in Queens. The same building where she used to work before everything collapsed 3 years ago. The same address tied to the restructuring that had ended her job. The room felt different now. Not smaller. Sharper. The past was no longer separate from this moment. It was connected. Directly. She flipped the page back and checked again. The account routing number. The authorization signature. Not Daniel's. Someone else's. But the approval line traced back to Whitmore Holdings. This was not just his move. It was part of something larger. Emily closed the portfolio carefully. Exactly as she had found it. No trace. No shift. She stepped back just as the door opened wider. Richard stood there, his expression tight. Emily, he said, his voice low but urgent. You need to come back out here. Emily nodded once. Calm. Controlled. She walked past him into the hallway. The noise of the restaurant returned in waves. Louder now. Sharper. At table 12, the situation had escalated. One of the investors was standing. Another had his phone out, clearly pulling up financial records. Laura remained seated, but her posture had changed. Straight. Firm. Focused entirely on Daniel. Daniel himself was no longer relaxed. His shoulders were squared. His jaw set. Still composed. But no longer untouchable. Richard stepped slightly ahead of Emily. "We are handling this," he said quietly. "Do not say anything unless I ask you to." Emily did not respond. She watched the table. Calculated the angles. The timing. Then Laura's voice cut through the room. Clear. Direct. "Daniel, I want to know where that money went." Silence followed. Not complete, but heavy enough to slow everything else down. Daniel looked at her. Then at the investors. Then back at Laura. "You are overreacting," he said. Calm. Controlled. But thinner now. Emily stepped forward. Not into the center. Just enough to be seen. She said gently, her voice steady. Laura's eyes moved to her. Not dismissive. Not questioning. Listening. "There is something else you should see," Emily added. Richard turned sharply. "Emily," he warned. But she did not stop. Not this time. The balance had shifted again. Not fully. But enough. Emily reached into her apron. Not for the receipt. Not for the note. For her phone. She held it at her side. Screen dark. Ready. Daniel's eyes locked onto the movement immediately. This time, there was no calculation. Only recognition. He knew. Whatever control he had left depended on what she was about to do next. And for the first time that night, Emily was not reacting to the moment. She was shaping it. Emily lifted the phone just enough for the screen to catch the light. She did not rush. She did not explain. She simply tapped once and turned it toward Laura. "You should see this," she said. Laura leaned forward slightly. The movement was small, but it shifted the entire table. One of the investors stepped closer. Richard took a half step forward as if to intervene, then stopped. On the screen, the image was clear. A wire transfer confirmation. $8 million. Timestamp. 3:12 p.m. Laura's eyes moved across the details. Then she looked up at Daniel. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice did not rise. It sharpened. Daniel did not answer immediately. His gaze moved to the phone, then to Emily. This time, there was no attempt to dismiss her. Only calculation under pressure. "That is internal," he said finally. "You are looking at something out of context." Emily spoke before Laura could respond. "There is more," she said. She tapped the screen again. Another image appeared. The contract draft. The handwritten note. The same line. Transfer executed prior to disclosure window. The investor who had been standing exhaled slowly. "Daniel," he said, his tone no longer neutral. "That is not a timing issue." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You are basing conclusions on partial documents," he replied. "You do not understand the structure." Laura did not look at the documents again. She looked at him. "Then explain it," she said. Daniel leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table. A controlled move. Grounding himself. It was a protective measure, he said. A temporary allocation to secure liquidity before the market shifted. Emily watched him. The words were polished. Clean. But they did not align with what she had seen. Not completely. "Then why is the receiving account not under Whitmore Holdings?" she asked. The question landed instantly. Daniel's head turned toward her. Sharp. The investors reacted at the same time. One of them spoke. "What account?" Emily held the phone steady. "Carter Logistics LLC," she said. The name hung in the air. Laura blinked once. "Carter," she repeated. Emily nodded slightly. "That is the entity listed on the transfer." Daniel's expression changed. Not fully. But enough. A crack. Small. Visible. That is a holding structure, he said quickly. It is standard practice. Emily took one step closer to the table. Not aggressive. Precise. The address listed for that entity is in Queens, she said. A small office building on 43rd Avenue. Laura's eyes narrowed. And, she asked. Emily met her gaze. That building was part of a restructuring case 3 years ago, she said. Multiple employees were let go after internal discrepancies were reported. Daniel's voice cut in. That is irrelevant. Emily did not look at him. It is relevant if the same structure is being used again, she replied. The investor who had been silent until now finally spoke. Daniel, he said, we need full disclosure on this. Now. The power had shifted. Not completely. But clearly. Daniel was no longer leading the room. He was responding to it. Laura leaned back slightly, her eyes still fixed on him. You told me everything was transparent, she said. Daniel's composure returned in pieces. It is, he said. But this conversation is happening in the wrong setting. Emily lowered the phone slightly. Just enough. She was not finished. Not yet. She glanced at Richard. Then back at the table. There is one more thing, she said. Daniel's eyes locked onto hers instantly. This time, there was no attempt to hide the tension. What else? Laura asked. Emily hesitated for half a second. Not uncertainty. Timing. Then she spoke. The authorization signature on the transfer is not yours, she said. Silence followed. Immediate. Heavy. One of the investors leaned forward. Then whose is it? Emily looked down at the phone for a brief second. Then back up. That is the part one have not shown yet, she said. And for the first time since this began, every single person at the table realized the truth was still only halfway revealed. Daniel did not look surprised this time. That was the first thing Emily noticed. Instead of reacting, he leaned back slightly and let out a quiet breath, as if something had just confirmed exactly what he expected. Of course it is not mine, he said calmly. That would defeat the entire purpose of structuring the transfer. The confidence in his voice returned. Not forced. Rebuilt. One of the investors frowned. What purpose? Daniel folded his hands again. Composed. Controlled. Risk separation, he said. If the market flagged the movement, it would not trace directly back to Whitmore Holdings. Laura stared at him. So you did it intentionally, she said. Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. I protected the company, he replied. Emily watched the shift carefully. He was no longer denying. He was reframing. Moving the narrative from concealment to strategy. It was a stronger position. One that sounded reasonable to anyone who only saw the surface. Richard stepped in slightly. Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately, he suggested. Daniel shook his head once. No, he said. I think clarity is better. He turned toward the investors. Gentlemen, you know how these structures work. Temporary allocations. Layered entities. It is standard in volatile conditions. One of them nodded slowly, but not fully convinced. Another crossed his arms. Standard is one thing, he said. Timing is another. Daniel gave a small smile. Timing is exactly why it worked, he replied. The room shifted again. Not back in his control. But no longer entirely against him. Emily felt it. The pressure easing from him. Redirecting. She stepped forward. Slightly. Not interrupting. Just present. Daniel's eyes flicked to her. You have done your part, he said, his tone almost polite now. But you are missing context. Emily tilted her head slightly. Then help me understand, she said. Daniel held her gaze for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket again. Slowly. This time, he pulled out the folded document she had noticed earlier. The one he had kept separate. The one not in the portfolio. He placed it on the table. Carefully. This, he said, is the authorization you are looking for. Laura leaned forward. One of the investors stepped closer again. Emily did not move. She watched. Daniel opened the paper and turned it toward them. A signature sat at the bottom. Clean. Precise. Not his. This was approved by an external partner, he said. Independent. Accountable. Completely legal. Laura's eyes moved across the page. Who is this? She asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. He let the silence stretch just long enough. Then he said, someone who understands how to protect assets when others hesitate. Emily's gaze sharpened. The signature was partially obscured by the fold, but she could see enough. The last name. Carter. The same entity. The same pattern. But something about the handwriting felt familiar. Not just the name. The shape. The stroke. A memory surfaced. Not from tonight. From years ago. A form she had signed once. A document she had reviewed before everything collapsed. She took one step closer. Slow. Intentional. Can I see that? She asked. Daniel looked at her. For a moment, it seemed like he might refuse. Then he slid the paper slightly across the table. Not fully. Just enough. Go ahead, he said. Take a look. The confidence in his voice was back. Stronger now. He believed he had regained control. Emily picked up the edge of the paper. Lightly. She did not rush. Her eyes moved across the signature. Then to the printed name beneath it. Then to the authorization code in the corner. And that was when it clicked. Not the name. Not the company. The code. A sequence she had seen before. A system she used to work with. One that required dual verification. One that could not be executed by a single external partner. Her grip tightened just slightly. She placed the paper back down. Exactly where it had been. You are right, she said quietly. Daniel smiled. Small. Certain. I usually am, he replied. Emily looked at him. Calm. Unshaken. This is not just one signature, she said. The smile on his face did not disappear. But it paused. Just for a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, the balance shifted again. Because now, she was no longer questioning what he had done. She was starting to understand how he had done it. Daniel's smile held, but it no longer carried the same weight. Emily saw it clearly now. The pause had not been fear. It had been recognition. He knew she was getting closer. And yet, he had still chosen to show the document. That meant one thing. He believed the rest of the structure would protect him. Emily let her hand fall naturally to her side. No sudden moves. No urgency. She had what she needed. For now. You are right, she repeated, her voice steady. It is not just one signature. Daniel leaned back slightly. Then you understand, he said. Emily gave a small nod. I understand that this system requires dual authorization, she replied. The words landed differently this time. Not as a question. As a statement. One of the investors looked up sharply. Dual authorization, he echoed. Emily turned slightly toward him. Yes, she said. For transfers above $5 million, the system requires two separate approvals. One internal. One external. Daniel's expression did not change, but his fingers tapped once against the table. A small detail. Easy to miss. Emily did not miss it. Laura's eyes moved between them. "So where is the second approval?" she asked. Emily did not answer immediately. She let the silence stretch just long enough. Then she said, "That is exactly what I was about to ask." Daniel exhaled slowly. "It is embedded in the system," he said. "You would not see it on a printed copy." Emily tilted her head slightly. "That is true," she said. "Unless someone exported the full authorization log. A new detail. A new direction." One of the investors leaned forward. "Do we have that log?" he asked. Daniel's gaze shifted briefly toward him. Then back to Emily. "That is not something a restaurant employee would have access to," he said. The tone was calm again. Controlled. But the edge had returned. Emily did not react to the dismissal. Instead, she reached into her apron and pulled out her phone again. This time, she did not hold it at her side. She placed it gently on the table. "Screen up." "You are right," she said. "I do not have access to your system." She tapped once. The screen lit up. A photo. Not of the transfer. Not of the contract. Something else. A close-up of the bottom corner of the document. The part most people ignored. A faint printed line. Authorization reference ID. Laura leaned closer. One of the investors did the same. Daniel's eyes locked onto the screen. Emily spoke calmly. "This ID can be traced," she said. "Not through your internal system. Through the clearing network that processed the transfer." The investor who had been questioning Daniel earlier straightened. "That is true," he said. "Those logs are external." Emily nodded slightly. "And they record both approvals," she added. Daniel's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he relaxed again. "Even if that is the case," he said, "you still do not have access to those records." Emily looked at him. Calm. Focused. "No," she agreed. "But someone at this table might." The shift was immediate. The investors looked at each other. One of them reached for his phone. Laura did not move. She kept her eyes on Daniel. "Do not," Daniel said quietly. The word was not loud. But it carried weight. The investor paused. Looked at him. Then at Emily. The room held its breath again. Emily did not push. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood there. Letting the possibility settle. Letting the system do what it was designed to do. Reveal. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You are making assumptions based on incomplete information," he said. Emily met his gaze. "Then let the full information speak," she replied. The investor's thumb hovered over his phone screen. One tap away. Laura finally spoke. "I think we should verify it," she said. Simple. Direct. Final. Daniel looked at her. For the first time, there was no immediate response. No polished answer. Just a brief silence. And in that silence, Emily understood something new. This was not just about exposing a lie. This was about forcing the truth into a place where it could not be controlled. The investor took a breath and tapped the screen. The request was sent. External verification. Real time. Unstoppable now. Daniel sat back. Slowly. His expression returned to neutral. But his eye stayed on Emily. Not angry. Not dismissive. Measuring. Waiting. The trap had not closed yet. Not completely. But it was already too late to step out of it. Emily stood still. Watching. Counting the seconds. Because when that verification came back, it would not just show who signed the transfer. It would show who should not have been able to sign it at all. The table went quiet in a way that felt different from before. Not tense. Not uncertain. Waiting. The investor who had sent the request kept his phone flat on the table, screen glowing softly, a small loading icon spinning in the corner. No one spoke. Even the background noise of the restaurant seemed distant now, as if the entire room had narrowed to this single moment. Emily stood still, her hands relaxed at her sides, her eyes on the phone. Daniel watched her instead. Not the screen. Not the investors. Just her. "You are very confident for someone who does not have access to the full system," he said finally. His voice was calm again. Controlled. But lower now. More focused. Emily met his gaze. "I do not need full access," she replied. "I just need one inconsistency." Daniel gave a faint smile. "And you think you found one?" Emily did not answer. She did not need to. The investor's phone vibrated once. A short, sharp sound. Everyone's attention snapped to it. He picked it up immediately, eyes scanning the screen. His expression changed. Not dramatically. But enough. His posture straightened. His breathing slowed. "Well?" Laura asked. Her voice was steady, but there was no patience left in it. The investor did not respond right away. He looked at Daniel. Then back at the screen. Then at Emily. "The authorization log came through," he said. Daniel leaned back slightly, as if preparing for impact. "And?" Laura pressed. The investor exhaled slowly. "There are 2 approvals," he said. "One internal. One external. That part checks out." Daniel nodded once. "Of course it does," he said. Emily did not move. Not yet. She watched the investor's eyes. Not his words. The hesitation behind them. But the investor continued, his tone shifting. "The internal approval did not come from your executive account." The room tightened instantly. Laura's head turned toward Daniel. "What does that mean?" she asked. Daniel's expression remained neutral. Too neutral. "It means the system routed the approval through a delegated authority," he said. "Smooth. Immediate. Ready." Emily spoke before the explanation could settle. "That would require a secondary credential," she said. "A physical token or a biometric confirmation." The investor nodded slightly. "That is correct." Laura's eyes narrowed. "And who has that level of access?" she asked. Daniel's fingers tapped once against the table again. The same pattern. The same signal. "A limited number of executives," he replied. Emily took one step forward. Not into the center. Just enough to shift the angle. "Or someone who had access to that system before," she said. The words landed differently this time. Not as speculation. As direction. The investor looked at his phone again. "There is more," he said. Daniel's gaze sharpened. "Read it," Laura said. The investor hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he did. "The internal authorization was executed using a legacy credential," he said. "An account that is no longer active." Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. Laura's voice cut through it. "Whose account?" she asked. The investor looked up slowly. His eyes moved from the screen to Emily. Then to Daniel. Then back to the screen again. "The name attached to the credential is," he stopped. Just for a moment. Long enough for the weight to settle. Emily did not move. But inside, something aligned. The timeline. The address. The system. It all pointed to the same place. The same moment 3 years ago. The same collapse that had ended her career. "Say it," Laura said. The investor swallowed once. Then he spoke. "Emily Carter." The room did not react all at once. It fractured. Laura's eyes widened. One of the investors stepped back. Richard turned sharply toward Emily. Daniel did not move at all. He just watched her. Calm. Still. Waiting. Emily felt every gaze in the room shift toward her. But she did not look away. She looked at the investor. Then at the phone. Then back at Daniel. And for the first time since this began, the truth was no longer something she was revealing. It was something she had just been pulled directly into. The name did not echo. It landed. Clean. Final. Emily Carter. Emily did not flinch. She did not step back. She looked at the investor holding the phone, then slowly reached out her hand. "May I see that?" she asked. Her voice was steady. Not defensive. Not surprised. The investor hesitated for a fraction of a second, then handed her the phone. Emily took it and read the screen herself. Authorization log. Internal credential. Emily Carter. Status. Inactive. Last recorded use. 3 years ago. Then updated. Today. 3:12 p.m. She nodded once and handed the phone back. "That is correct," she said quietly. Laura stared at her. "You are saying you authorized this?" she asked. The question was direct. Sharp. Emily turned to her. "No," she said. "I am saying someone used my old credentials." Daniel finally moved. Just slightly. He leaned forward, his voice calm again, but this time with a different edge. "That is a serious accusation," he said. Emily met his gaze. "It is a serious system breach," she replied. One of the investors spoke immediately. "That is not possible," he said. "Legacy credentials are deactivated after termination." Emily nodded. "They are supposed to be," she said. Then she reached into her apron and pulled out her phone again. This time, she unlocked it and scrolled. Not photos. Notes. A saved document. She turned the screen toward them. "This is my termination letter," she said. The document was clear. Date. 3 years ago. Reason. Organizational restructuring. And at the bottom. A line most people ignored. System access scheduled for deactivation within 30 business days. Laura leaned closer. 30 days, she repeated. Emily nodded. "During that period, the account remains active for audit purposes," she said. "Limited access. But still valid." The investor frowned. "But that was 3 years ago." Emily's eyes shifted to Daniel. "Yes," she said. "Which means the account should have been permanently closed." Silence followed. Then she added, "Unless someone deliberately kept it open." The weight of the statement settled across the table. Daniel did not interrupt this time. He watched. Measured. Calculated. But the timing was no longer his. Emily took one step closer. "The authorization log shows a legacy credential," she continued. "That means someone accessed an account that should not exist anymore." Laura's voice dropped. "And you think Daniel did that?" Emily shook her head slightly. "I do not think," she said. "I can prove it." That was new. The shift was immediate. One of the investors straightened. "How?" he asked. Emily tapped her phone again. Another image appeared. A close-up of the authorization code. The same one. From the document Daniel had revealed. "This code links both approvals," she said. "Internal and external." She looked at the investor holding the phone. "If you run the full trace, it will show the access point." The investor did not hesitate this time. He tapped the screen again. Another request sent. Deeper verification. Daniel leaned back slowly. "You are building a narrative out of fragments," he said. But his voice was quieter now. Emily did not respond. She watched the phone again. Seconds passed. Then the screen updated. The investor's eyes widened slightly. "What is it?" Laura asked. He turned the phone toward the table. "The access point," he said. "It shows where the internal credential was used." Emily leaned in just enough to see. A location tag. Not Queens. Not an external office. The coordinates resolved into a familiar address. Manhattan. Midtown. Whitmore Holdings headquarters. Laura looked at Daniel. "Your office," she said. Daniel did not answer. He did not deny it either. Emily spoke softly. "My account was used from inside your building," she said. The room shifted completely. No ambiguity left. No space to redirect. One of the investors stepped back. Another shook his head slowly. Laura stood up. Not abruptly, but with purpose. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady, "you used her identity to move $8 million. Daniel looked at her. Then at Emily. Then at the table. For the first time, he did not speak immediately. The silence stretched. Heavy. Real. And then Emily noticed something else. A detail she had not seen before. A second entry in the log. Right below the first. Same timestamp window. Different access point. Different location. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Because if one part of this had come from his office, then the second one had come from somewhere else entirely. Emily's eyes stayed on the second entry. The numbers were small. Easy to miss. A different access point. A different location. Her breath slowed as the meaning settled in. This was not one move. It was two. Coordinated. Deliberate. Someone inside his office. And someone outside it. The room felt distant for a moment. Voices blurred. Glasses clinked somewhere far away. Then a memory broke through. Sharp. Uninvited. 3 years ago. The same address in Queens. A cramped office with flickering fluorescent lights. A stack of files on her desk. She had stood there, holding a report. In her hands, her voice steady as she pointed out discrepancies no one wanted to see. "We cannot sign off on this," she had said back then. Her supervisor had looked at her with quiet frustration. "Emily, let it go," he had replied. She had not. She had pushed harder. Sent the report. Escalated it. And later that night, she had received a call. Her mother's voice on the other end. Tired. Worried. "You lost your job?" she had asked softly. Emily had stood in silence, gripping her phone, unable to explain how doing the right thing had cost everything. "You should have just kept your head down," her mother had said. Not angry. Just hurt. The memory tightened in her chest. Back in the present, Emily blinked once. The table came back into focus. Laura was still standing. The investors were watching. Daniel sat still, his silence heavier now. Emily looked down at her own hands. For the first time that night, they were not completely steady. Just a slight tremor. Barely visible. But real. She reached into her apron slowly. Not for evidence this time. For her phone. She unlocked it, her thumb hesitating for a fraction of a second before she opened her contacts. One name sat near the top. Mom. She stared at it. The room faded again, but not completely. She could still hear Laura's voice in the background. Still feel the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Emily inhaled slowly. Then pressed call. The line rang once. Twice. Her grip tightened slightly. When the call connected, her voice did not come out immediately. She swallowed. Then spoke. "Mom," she said softly. A pause. Then a response on the other end. Familiar. Warm. Careful. "Emily." Her voice broke slightly this time. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to be heard. "I should have called you sooner," she said. Her eyes lowered for a second, a single tear catching the light before she wiped it away quickly. Around her, no one spoke. The entire table watched without understanding. Emily took a breath. "I thought I had to fix everything alone," she continued. "But I was wrong." On the other end, her mother said something quiet. Something steady. Emily nodded, even though it could not be seen. "I am okay," she said. "And I am not going to walk away from this again." She ended the call gently. No rush. No hesitation this time. When she looked up, her expression had changed. Not softer. Clearer. She turned her attention back to the table. To Daniel. To the phone still in the investor's hand. "There are 2 access points," she said calmly. "One inside your office." Her eye shifted slightly. "Focus now." "And one somewhere else." Daniel's gaze followed hers. For the first time, there was no confidence left to hide behind. Only calculation under pressure. Emily stepped forward. "Just enough." "Who else had access to that system?" she asked quietly. And this time, the question was not about proving what had happened. It was about uncovering who had helped him do it. The silence after Emily's question did not break immediately. It tightened. It pulled every eye toward Daniel, toward the phone, toward the truth that was no longer hiding behind polished explanations. Then Laura moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. She reached for Daniel's jacket and pulled it slightly toward her. "Who else had access?" she asked again, her voice steady but heavier now. Daniel did not answer. For the first time that night, he looked away. The investor holding the phone spoke quietly. "The second access point just updated," he said. Everyone turned. He rotated the screen toward the table. A new location appeared beneath the first. Queens. 43rd Avenue. The same building. The same address tied to Carter Logistics. Emily felt it click fully now. 2 points. 2 actors. One inside. One outside. A system that required both. Laura's hand tightened on the edge of the table. "So you did not act alone," she said. Daniel exhaled slowly. The control was gone now. Not shattered. Just stripped away. "It was structured," he said. "That is how these things work." Emily stepped forward one last time. "Who signed from Queens?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. Then past her. Toward the entrance of the restaurant. His expression shifted. Subtle. But unmistakable. Emily followed his gaze. The glass doors at the front opened. A woman stepped inside. Late 60s. Silver hair pulled back neatly. A navy coat still damp from the evening air. Her eye scanned the room once, then locked onto Daniel. She walked straight toward the table. No hesitation. No confusion. Laura stood frozen as the woman approached. "Mother," she said quietly. The woman stopped beside the table. Her hands trembled slightly. As she removed her gloves. She looked at Daniel. Then at Laura. Then at Emily. "I told you this would not stay buried," she said softly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You were not supposed to come here," he replied. The woman shook her head. "I was not supposed to sign anything either," she said. The words landed like a final piece falling into place. Laura's breath caught. "You signed it?" she asked. The woman nodded once. He told me it was to protect the company, she said. He said it was temporary. Her voice broke slightly. I trusted him. Emily felt the room shift completely. No more ambiguity. No more layers to peel back. Just truth. Daniel looked at his mother. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. You should not have come, he repeated. The woman's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I had to, she said. Because I saw what you did to her. She gestured slightly toward Emily. And I could not let you do it again. Laura stepped back slowly, her hand rising to her mouth. You used your own mother's name, she said. Daniel did not deny it. He did not explain it. He just sat there. Still. Exposed. Emily felt something in her chest release. Not triumph. Not relief. Something quieter. The weight of 3 years finally finding its place. Then the front door opened again. A second figure rushed in. Breathless. A woman in her 50s. Coat half-buttoned. Eyes wide with worry. Emily, she called out. Emily turned instantly. Mom. The distance between them disappeared in seconds. Her mother reached her and pulled her into a tight embrace. Arms wrapped around her shoulders. Holding on as if letting go was no longer an option. Emily's hands gripped the back of her mother's coat. Her breath broke for the first time. A quiet sob escaped before she could stop it. Her mother's hand moved to the back of her head, steady, warm. I am here, she whispered. I should have been here before. Emily shook her head slightly against her shoulder. I should have come back sooner, she said, her voice trembling. Her mother pulled back just enough to look at her. Eyes wet. But steady. You did, she said softly. You came back when it mattered. Behind them, the room had gone silent again. No one moved. No one spoke. The investors stood still. Laura remained by the table, her world shifting in real time. Daniel sat where he was, no longer the center of anything. Emily wiped her eyes quickly, but the tear had already fallen. Her mother reached for her hand and held it firmly. Warm. Real. Present. Emily looked back at the table one last time. Then at her mother. And in that moment, everything aligned. Not because the truth had been exposed, but because she was no longer standing alone when it was.